So we're moving on now to look at the brain, obviously part of your central nervous system. And we're going to look at this over a series of videos looking at the structure of the brain, what each of the parts of the brain do, and how that brain of yours has helped humans to take over the world. So, firstly, what is the brain? Well, it's got neurons in it. That should not be a surprise because what we're doing is we're connecting and processing that sensory information, and we're sending messages out to the body saying move, digest, breathe, all that kind of stuff. Some of which is, of course, automatic, some of which is stuff you have to think about. It's got about 100 billion neurons and tens of thousands of synapses and connections for each one. Within it, we have two parts. We have what's known as grey matter and white matter. So grey matter, if you remember the structure of the neuron, that's where we'll find the cell bodies, the dendrites, the axons. But the white matter, that's all axon that's covered in those myelin sheaths, and that's what makes it white, because that's what that fattiness of that myelin. Okay? Within the brain itself, there's no sensory nerve endings. So you're not sensing anything within it. So you can't actually feel anything within your brain. Okay? Because of that, as long as we give an anaesthetic to the nerve endings in the scalp, it's actually possible to operate on someone, on their brain, inside their brain while they're still awake. And it's actually sometimes really important to do that because then you can actually check which part of the brain you're in, because it all looks pretty similar, to make sure that you're operating on one bit without damaging essential functions. One thing you would have noticed about it is that it's wrinkled. Okay, unlike a rat brain. So this is a rat brain, this is a human brain. Okay, we've got all these foldings in there. What that does is that increases the surface area. Increasing the surface area means that we can have more connections between the dendrites and the axons, so between one neuron and the next. By wrinkling it, we are increasing the size of the grey matter without really changing the amount of white matter. Okay, so the axons don't really change, but the connections do. Okay, if you were to unfold all of the brain, then it would cover about 2 square meters. Every so often, there are humans that are born with conditions without wrinkles. Obviously, this is going to severely impact on their quality of life because they're not going to be able to develop and talk and move in the same way as most humans. Okay. So when we compare the species, we can see that it's not just size that matters, it's also wrinkliness. So, I mean, rats are not that intelligent. They have a small brain, but they also have a very smooth brain. Cats have got slight wrinkles. I'll tell you, my cats are pretty stupid, but it took one of them about 2 weeks to figure out how to use a cat flap. But they do have some wrinkles. They are able to do significantly more. They are able to domesticate themselves, and that's pretty clever. Chimpanzees, our closest relatives, they have a slightly bigger brain than a cat, but more importantly, they have a much more wrinkled brain. So that surface area is really increased. So by increasing that surface area, we know we've got a much more intelligent animal there. And finally, the dolphin. Well, we know that dolphins have got great intelligence, very social beings, great at communicating, and they have a large brain, but they also have a very wrinkled brain. Okay. We'll look a little bit in this video at typical behaviours of these species. We'll look at how they can communicate with each other.
An enduring myth says we use only 10% of our brain, the other 90% standing idly by for spare capacity. Hucksters promise to unlock that hidden potential with methods based on neuroscience, but all they really unlock is your wallet. 2/3 of the public and nearly half of science teachers mistakenly believe the 10% myth. In the 1890s, William James, the father of American psychology, said, "Most of us do not meet our mental potential." James meant this as a challenge, not an indictment of scant brain usage. But the misunderstanding stuck. Also, scientists couldn't figure out for a long time the purpose of our massive frontal lobes, or broad areas of the parietal lobe. Damage didn't cause motor or sensory deficits, so authorities concluded they didn't do anything. For decades, these parts were called silent areas, their function elusive. We've since learned that they underscore executive and integrative ability, without which we would hardly be human. They're crucial to abstract reasoning, planning, weighing decisions, and flexibly adapting to circumstances. The idea that 9/10 of your brain sits idly by in your skull looks silly when we calculate how the brain uses energy. Rodent and canine brains consume 5% of total body energy. Monkey brains use 10%. An adult human brain, which accounts for only 2% of the body's mass, consumes 20% of daily glucose burned. In children, that figure is 50%, and in infants, 60%. This is far more than expected for their relative brain sizes, which scale in proportion to body size. Human ones weigh 1.5 kilograms, elephant brains 5 kilograms, and whale brains 9 kilograms. Yet on a per-weight basis, humans pack in more neurons than any other species. This dense packing is what makes us so smart. There is a trade-off between body size and the number of neurons a primate, including us, can sustain. A 25-kilogram ape has to eat 8 hours a day to uphold a brain with 53 billion neurons. The invention of cooking 1.5 million years ago gave us a huge advantage. Cooked food is rendered soft and pre-digested outside of the body. Our guts more easily absorb its energy. Cooking frees up time and provides more energy than if we ate foodstuffs raw. And so we can sustain brains with 86 billion densely packed neurons, 40% more than the ape. Here's how it works. Half the calories a brain burns go towards simply keeping the structure intact by pumping sodium and potassium ions across membranes to maintain an electrical charge. To do this, the brain has to be an energy hog. It consumes an astounding 3.4 times 10 to the 21st power ATP molecules per minute. ATP being the coal of the body's furnace. The high cost of maintaining resting potentials in all 86 billion neurons means that little energy is left to propel signals down axons and across synapses, the nerve discharges that actually get things done. Even if only a tiny percentage of neurons fired in a given region at any one time, the energy burden of generating spikes over the entire brain would be unsustainable. Here's where energy efficiency comes in. Letting just a small proportion of cells signal at any one time, known as sparse coding, uses the least energy but carries the most information, because the small number of signals have thousands of possible paths by which to distribute themselves. A drawback of sparse coding within a huge number of neurons is its cost. Worse, if a big proportion of cells never fire, then they are superfluous, and evolution should have jettisoned them long ago. The solution is to find the optimum proportion of cells that the brain can have active at once. For maximum efficiency, between 1% and 16% of cells should be active at any given moment. This is the energy limit we have to live with in order to be conscious at all. The need to conserve resources is the reason most of the brain's operations must happen outside of consciousness. It's why multitasking is a fool's errand. We simply lack the energy to do 2 things at once, let alone 3 or 5. When we try, we do each task less well than if we'd given it our full attention. The numbers are against us. Your brain is already smart and powerful, so powerful that it needs a lot of power to stay powerful, and so smart that it has built in an energy efficiency plan. So don't let a fraudulent myth make you guilty about your supposedly lazy brain. Guilt would be a waste of energy. After all this, don't you realize it's dumb to waste mental energy? You have billions of power-hungry neurons to maintain. So hop to it.
Okay. Within the structure of the brain, and we'll come on to this more in the next video, but within the structure of the brain, within that white and grey matter, there's 3 main parts we can split it into that I want you to think about and look a little bit into before the next one. The forebrain is the majority of the brain. the midbrain, right in the middle, very small, and the hindbrain, which connects to your spinal cord. In the next video, we'll go on and look a bit more at the structure of each of those and what they do.